and parcel of who we are and what we do. One of the greatest walls in the world was created a long time ago, from the 6th century BC to about the 1500s, 1600s. So if you go back as far as Daniel, in the lion's den, that Daniel, and you go ahead to Martin Luther, that is the time that the Great Wall of China was built. Huge amount of time. And it is the longest man-made structure in the world. In fact, it's about 6,500 kilometres long. And while you can't see all of the 6,500 kilometres today, because a lot of it's ruined, you can see a significant part of it. It's one of those things you can see from space, and it's about, when it was originally built, it took about 1 million men to guard it, and about 3 million men to make it, and it is estimated that upwards of 3 million men died in the process of making this, and so today we can say it's the largest cemetery in the world. The Great Wall of China is one of those things I've never seen, but I'd love to see it. One of those things that you really need to understand, I suppose, from what we're talking about, is that walls are designed to divide. Walls are designed to separate, and walls are designed to keep things out. The Huns, the Goths, the Vandals, the variety of tribes that the Chinese were trying to keep out, that's what the wall was built for. And it was designed to divide them from being polluted from all of these other groups around the world. However, bridges are designed for something else. And you'll notice that most of us know the history of a lot of the harbour bridge, but it's the world's best known coat hanger. It has the greatest fireworks, and it's the centre of a city. However, that was not the reason why it was built. The reason why it was built was because there were two Sydneys developing, the one south of the harbour and one north of the harbour. And while the centre of the CBD was the centre of finance and merchandising and whatever, the north of the city was feeling like it was left out. And so in 1912, Bradfield and his band of merry men, they decided, why don't we build a bridge? And they had a variety of designs put forward, but eventually this large span bridge was built, and it's the fourth largest span bridge in the world. And if you want to see a miniature of the harbour bridge, you go to Tyne in Newcastle in England, and you can see a miniature. It's only about 1/4 of a K long. However, this one is much larger. Today, the harbour bridge, we sort of just drive over and think nothing of it. However, it took from 1912 to 1932. That period of time from go to woe, it took them all that time to build. There's about 6 million rivets. Now, I don't know who's counted them, but they think there are more than 6 million. However, some of them are in the harbour and some of them are in the bridge. The way in which they used to, the largest one's about so long and weighs about 3.5 kilos, and the smallest one is very short. However, the rivets, they got everything all lined up, and they had the coke and coal and done, they had them red hot, and rather than have a very sophisticated method of moving them from the coke and coal, they just used to fling them. And the guy on the other side had a bucket. He'd put his bucket out and try and find out where the rivet was supposed to go. He'd catch it, tongs, and put it in the hole, belt it as hard as he could, and let it cool down. And that's the way it was done. OH&S, they wouldn't have been all surprised. I'm sure they would have been surprised and they wouldn't have been impressed. But the Harbour Bridge, they have the towers, which are just for look's sake. They have no structural function. And the granite was brought from where? Moruya, which is down south, and it took over 272,000 litres to put the first 3 coats on. And since then, the Harbour Bridge has been perpetually painted from one end to the other to keep it going, and it should be up there for another couple of 100 years, all things being equal. But it contains the shortest highway in Australia, which is 2.4 kilometres long, and it's called the Bradfield Highway, named after Bradfield, who was the designer, and most of the work and the vision that it had came from him. And so today we look at the bridge and we ask ourselves, why would put a bridge up? Well, obviously to join north and south. The second reason why you'd put a bridge is to include in the whole of Sydney to be able to enjoy each other's company and combine the best of all worlds, so that on the north they can enjoy Italian food and on the south they can enjoy pies and chips. So bridges and walls, they have a function. And I would say that the largest function of bridges and walls are obvious. One's to keep out and the other is to bring in. But for me, I would say the biggest bridge that we can build to our community and those around is the concept of forgiveness. We was mentioned in our prayer by Jeremy that there is 2 men in Australia, in Indonesia, who are from Australia, who made some stupid decisions, and they're probably going to be executed pretty soon. Karen Felberg's brother is in fact in constant contact with these 2 men, and he can say without a shadow of a doubt they have become good Christian men. They lead out in the prison, and they in fact they're part of the confidants of the inmates there. They have learned the value and the power of forgiveness. They will admit they deserve what they're going to get. They don't want to get it, mind you, but they admit they deserve what they're going to get because they did something which was stupid. But we ask the question, why kill people if they've changed? But that's not my question to ask today. So, bridges and walls and forgiveness. I'd like you to listen.
Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything."
This story tells us a lot about a boy who wanted what he wanted. He abused the family trust and deserted his community. He became a loner only because he looked at himself and not his community. The community in that day was far stronger The elders, whatever the elders wanted, they got. Whatever the younger ones were required to do, they had to do it. It was a very different world. Mind you, he went with his father's blessing and got his estate.
When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate."
Now, this story has a son and a father. The difference between the two is one cared, and the son realised that his father cared for his servants much better than he was surviving. Still, the father wanted to be where he was, but it starts off by saying that when he came to his senses. Now, one day I was talking about this story, and I knew there were a Jewish family in the church, and I said to this Jewish lady, I says, "What worse thing can a Jewish boy do than feed with pigs?" He says, "The only worst thing is to eat the pig." That is getting as low as a Jewish boy would ever get, to eat the food that the pigs were eating. He came to his senses and realised that his father, who had given him his estate, would welcome him back. And realising that is the case, we see that the brother who was returning home was given a party. But the scripture says when he was a long way off, it almost gives the picture that the father was regularly looking out for his son. Maybe he was coming home. And it says that a long way off, the father went to meet him. Now, in those days, the elder always was quite static. It was the young ones who always came to the elder. But this story gives us a picture of God who would break all the conventions and say, "While you are a long way off, I want to give you something, and I want to get you, and I would like you to be with me." And so he threw a party. You know, there's a lot of parties mentioned in the Bible, but this, I'm sure, was one of those really heartfelt parties that was given because the father realised that who was dead is now alive, who was lost is now found, and who was a servant is now a son. And so the party went on, but there was one grumpy moment.
Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. "Your brother has come," he replied, "and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." "My son," the father said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found."
The elder brother was the hard-working boy. He did what his father required. The younger brother, he was one who was philandering around the countryside. And he realises there's something that's not right here. How come I work all the time, I do what I'm required to do, I make sure it's all good, but my brother, who has wasted the family inheritance, comes home and he gets a party? The moral of the story is, be irresponsible and you get parties. And that is probably the message of Scripture. We who are irresponsible in the face of God, God is wanting to throw us a party. And if you can get my drift, you realise that while behaviour is not something that gains us favour with God, God is the one who is wanting us to join him. He's the initiator of the good stuff. The brother, the human, is the initiator of the bad stuff. And so this story, we ask ourselves the question, who is this story mostly about? It's called the prodigal son, but in fact there are two prodigals. Prodigal means generous. This story is all about a generous God who wants us to be with him. The son really is a moral of the story talking about God rather than the son. It was him who showed what sin was, and God is the one who showed what goodness and forgiveness was. Probably a story of forgiveness that is quite powerful in Scripture. Well, a few years ago, I was privileged to go to Korea, South Korea. And South Korea is a country full of driven people. 40 million people in the size of Victoria. They have their own shipbuilding business. They make all the televisions, probably nearly all the televisions we buy in this country. Samsung, they have millions of mobile phones made there. They're a driven people. And I landed at the airport. My host greeted me, and it was about 10 o'clock at night, and we're on the freeway. The freeways were chock-a-block, and I said, how come the freeways are so full? Oh, it's people going home from work. I said, what do you mean, shift work? He said, no. This is just the regular day's work. Because in Korea, the longer you spend in the presence of your boss, the more kudos you have. So they'll go early in the morning before the boss gets there, and they'll stay late after the boss leaves, and generally the boss will say, well, do you want to have some food to eat? So they go out and eat together and they come back to work. And so this phenomenon of having freeways chock-a-block at 10 o'clock at night is only reflecting the work ethic and the driven nature of the people. But my host took me for a bit of a tiki tour around his city, and he was very proud of it because it's not a bad city. And he took me to their war memorial. And the war memorial has a really fabulous story. And see that mound there? These two men are on the top of the mound. And that mound represents North and South Korea. There is one brother who is fit and strong and healthy, well-armed, well-shod, helmet on, looking very strong and capable. And there's another one who is very emaciated, very poorly dressed, very poorly shod, very few arms. And the story is told, and this is a true story, and the story is told that these two brothers, one from the south, one from the north, in their fighting endeavours, they actually met each other in a field near the border. And they looked at each other, and the South Korean, who was well armed, as he took aim, he said, that looks familiar. And so he kept his rifle up and walked towards. Eventually found it was his brother, his blood brother. And this story says that they forgave each other for what they had done, but they actually had to go back to where they came from. Today, Korea is a story of national forgiveness on one side, because families have been divided, and the animosity that you would think would be between the peoples, not the military, but the peoples, there's no animosity between the North and the South, because their families have been divided. Their families have actually been broken. And these two men in this story forgave each other for what they had done, and they went back. They didn't kill any more that day, realising that something that has happened to their nation has been destructive rather than healing. Today, I would like to suggest that forgiveness is the best thing that we have to offer the community and those around us. We might say, well, that's a pretty mamby-pamby thing, but it is the strongest conviction that or should I say it's the conviction that I have that it is the strongest weapon that we have to show our community that while we might be different from them, there is nothing that we hold against anyone, because it's the God that we serve who first loved us, who has offered forgiveness. God is more willing to forgive than we are willing to receive. The scripture says, whoever believes will be saved. And that forgiveness is the key to a fulfilled life. I know two men in the south of this state of ours who used to go along to church, and they still do. And nominating committee came along, and some heartfelt stories were told, and one of the nominations looked like it was going to go through, which wasn't going to be good for the church. And so the brother who actually spoke against the nomination, and you know, no nominating committees, they leak like sieves. They're worse than the parliament. So you've got to be careful what you say in a nominating committee. And any committee comes to that. Went to his brother, went to his house and asked for forgiveness. It wasn't forthcoming. So he took me along with him the next visit. He thought maybe a heavy will help out. And I was a good mate with the fellow who was feeling aggrieved, and so he took me along, and we had a couple of hours there, but forgiveness wasn't forthcoming. Today there is still a chasm between those two men from one comment that was made, which was the betterment of the church. We all need to be big enough to forgive, don't we? I would like you to listen to this song, and while this is not the end of the service, I'd like you to listen to this song because I believe it encapsulates what we are asking ourselves and telling ourselves about God.
I left my family, the love I had known, and I couldn't believe how calloused I'd grown. Then I woke up one morning in cold freezing rain, and I said I'll go back where I'd caused so much pain. Oh, just inside of the place where the lane meets the road, the Father If you've broken the trust and betrayed your best friend, if you're lost and confused, wondering where it will end, there's a way you